All right, peace to one and all. I am Christ I am Disciple. If you haven't seen my channel before, this is my channel. And all praise be to the Most High God. The Most High God comes first. Just want to say that. I wish you guys blessings. It's very early in the morning. So we out here working. In front of you, it's a picture of the great Dick Donner, also known as Richard Donner. That's on the set of Superman with, at the time, revolutionary equipment. A legendary director. The man who started off the superhero genre of movies. And here we're watching at a casual, behind the scenes shot of Zack Snyder, always with his camera. You know, if you guys know Zack always carrying a camera. The guy was born to do that. And he's also fast becoming as legendary as Richard Donner in terms of the worlds he's creating. And Zack Snyder mostly, I think most of his films are comic book related films. In fact, Dawn of the Dead, 300, Sucker Punch, Owls of Ga'Hoole, Watchmen. You know, he's known as a comic book director, and he directed a lot of comic book movies. People also talk about James Gunn, and we will go into him as well, and his sort of look on comic book movies as well. So here's Zack with Henry Cavill on the set of Man of Steel. And Zack is probably going over the rehearsal of what Henry was doing. They were rewatching it, I believe, on a monitor there. Here's Martin Scorsese framing what he wants to shoot. And they're basically looking at a framing of Henry Cavill on the set. So that's what those two pictures are saying. And there is the great Richard Donner. This is probably, I don't know which one this is. This could be Superman 1 or 2. But the cool thing about this is Richard doing a close-up here of Christopher Reeve. You got to understand, Richard Donner sacrificed quite a lot to get those two movies out. You know, his vision was pretty clear. He knew what needed to be done. He knew he needed to do something that was not done before. So he was a very revolutionary director in terms of what he did with Superman. And the success of that movie is as a result of his vision, his recruitment of actors, etc. All right, just so that you guys will remember, I recap what I did in the last video, which is I want to explain to you what Richard Donner said about parodies. He said that he had no eyes to do a movie called Superman, but when the script was sent to him with a ridiculous offer, I took it upon myself to read it and was very disappointed. Now, if you pay attention to the wording, because I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because they were making a parody out of something much like American history. You know, Superman's kind of part of American history. If you guys know fiction, yes, but still American history. See, he says, this was something that in the 30s, kids were brought up on, and it stayed with us. Right up until the time I read the script, it was still being published. And I was angry that they were disrespectful to the character. And I really want to double down and emphasize on that. And so I accepted the assignment only on the basis that I could rewrite it. Now, I want to stay right there with the two things he said. One, he was disappointed. Two, he was angry that the character was being disrespected in that script. Okay? These two things go hand in hand. If you listen to certain people as they're describing the Superman movie that they went to see, they will tell you that they were disappointed with the movie. And this is how Richard Donner felt about the parody that they were doing on Superman when he got the script. And that's exactly the feeling that I believe a lot of people who've seen this movie, I haven't seen the movie, and I'm not trying to see the movie. I know my taste in movies, and I know that movie's just not it. The way how they advertised it told me I shouldn't go see that movie. I haven't gone and seen The Suicide Squad. I'm not going to go see this movie. All right, there's certain movies I know when a movie, I know my taste in movies, and I know when a movie is not for me. Right? But other people, they try to give the movie a chance and they come out disappointed. They're disappointed because this movie made a parody out of the sacredness of American history. Superman is American history. Superman represents, in some ways, America values to the world. That is, the values that they at least espouse or they talk about, not necessarily what they do, as especially in terms of foreign policy, but in terms of the values that they hold true to. Truth, justice, the American way, as they say. Of course, that's changed now. Zack Snyder doesn't say truth, justice, the American way. He would say truth, justice, right? And that's probably as far as he goes. James Gunn also said truth, justice, and the human way. He's being a humanist when he speaks about it that way. It sounds a little clunky, but he's shooting for something beyond the United States of America. That humanism is something that Western Europe and the United States push for, right? Okay, so my point being, what James Gunn did is a parody of Superman, just like how we got the parody of Aquaman with James Wan's Aquaman, the parody of Blue Beetle, the parody of the Flash with Andy Muschietti's Flash, the parody of Shazam, even though Shazam is a parody. You know what I mean? Shazam is a parody of Superman, right? But as Richard Donner would say, a parody of a parody, because sometimes comics can be seen as a parody of life. You see, there are comics which are more grounded, and there are comics which are more fantastical. Okay, but they're all parodies. They're all metaphors for life, right? Okay, so anyways, the important two things I want you to remember as we go into comparing Man of Steel with the Superman movie that just came out is, one, the disappointment that a significant portion of people are having about this movie, and two, that it's disrespectful to the character because it's a parody of comics, already a parody of life. It's a parody of a parody. It's like a double entendre. And that can work. I mean, we saw, at least in TV particularly, we saw a parody of Batman in Batman and Robin uh, on the film, and also in Batman 1966, right? So we had Batman 1966, and we also had Batman and Robin. That's a parody of a parody, right? And that was successful with television, but it was not. It did not translate to film. Film did it. It was not never. Warner Bros. Has been continuously trying to get our characters not taken too seriously, but yet at the same time something that the whole family can enjoy. So trying to keep the comic book movies in the mythos, not trying to look at it too deeply. Okay, so they've been striving for that for the longest time. Marvel was able to do it with the Avengers, but and James Gunn was managed to do it with Guardians of the Galaxy. But that approach somehow does not work for DC. DC, because of the depth that's involved in DC, that the stories are tragic and so on and so on and so on, it's very difficult to do a DC movie that's superficial. You might get away with that with Marvel, because Marvel, even though Thor has always been a tremendous Marvel character, the Hulk has been a tremendous Marvel character. I must say two things, two very important points with respect to the Hulk, particularly. The Hulk is a very difficult character to capture and be successful on screen with. And Marvel has had a great difficulty actually depicting the Hulk as he's supposed to be depicted from the comics. The closest thing in Marvel to a good Hulk movie was that 1979 Incredible Hulk short movie for TV, in which Lou Ferrigno and the guy who played David Banner, not Bruce Banner, but David Banner, um, depicted him. And the reason is the Hulk is grounded in realism. The thing that makes the Hulk so incredible is the palpable danger of the Hulk. You have to have the stakes. The stakes have to be high. If for some reason you don't feel like the Hulk is as threatening as he should be, then this can't be a Hulk movie. This is why Avengers Infinity War backfires, because the Hulk does not back down. The Hulk always incrementally increases and is fueled by rage. You're not going to beat the Hulk. You're not going to get rid of the Hulk. You're just going to get him more angry. It's hard to kill the Hulk, okay? This is what is the essence of the mythos of the Hulk. And so, that is why a lot of fans were disappointed. Listen to me carefully. They were disappointed with the depiction of the Hulk in Infinity War and felt that the Hulk was disrespected the way how Thanos beat him. Let me say it again so you guys will understand. You will see these two words come up all the time when revered comic book character is made into a parody. You will hear the word disappointed by the person viewing it, and you will hear that the character has been disrespected. That's why I started off with this. Okay? Like I said, I don't think that Superman 2025, in the essence of the comics and in the essence of Superman, is a Superman film. That's not Superman that we saw. And I explained to you why. Okay? And this is, I can say it this way. This is James Gunn's understanding of Superman. We can put it that way. Because Superman could be all kinds of things, right? There's no limit to how Superman can be. There are all kinds of Superman, right? But in terms of the classic Superman, what we saw in James Gunn's movie, even though I didn't watch it, is not the classic Superman. Now, James Gunn will say, well, he's developing a Superman. His first combat was against the clone of himself, which he lost. Even though he's been around for 3 years, he hasn't had to fight anyone. He's been saving people, right? That's the argument that also was put forward in Joss Whedon's Justice League with the Flash. The Flash said, I've never done combat before. I just push people and run away, right? So he's borrowing from Joss Whedon's stuff, okay? Okay, right. Now, the thing about it is, he uses that as a context to say, this is Superman, but he does not command, his presence does not command respect. This is a Superman that can be disrespected by Superdog and by Supergirl and by Lex Luthor, and even in combat be disrespected. Right? He doesn't command respect. But how James Gunn comes back is he says, emotionally, however, he's Superman. He looks to save people when he can, right? He's looking to save life instead of take life, right? Even though he does take life, and even though he maims people in tremendous ways, right? So that's how he tried to circumvent it and say, this is my understanding of Superman. So James Gunn doesn't come with, kind of like Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan says, this is my understanding of Batman. But the difference is Christopher Nolan's not putting Batman in a comic booky world. He's not making it a comic booky world. He's putting Batman in the real world. So this is probably what Batman would look like in the real world. So he has wiggle room. James Gunn just decided, fuck everything. I can't make a movie like how Zach can make Man of Steel. That ain't never gonna happen. And I sure as hell ain't gonna make a movie That's outside of my ambit and capability of what I can do. So this is how we're going to make this movie. And Superman will have to conform to this. This is why James Gunn says, you know, certain things we held on to with Superman and certain things we did not hold on to with Superman. And so James Gunn's understanding of Superman is what you saw on the screen. Okay, and it reflects his background. It reflects how he sees himself. Okay. Unfortunately, that calls for disrespect to Superman. Right? And one of the most disrespectful things you could do to a character on screen is beat him up. And he was beating up Superman using different, and I understand, you know, people will say, well, look, Batman beat Superman in Batman v Superman, right? And Superman was always under assault. He wasn't getting beat up physically, but, you know, the world was going after him in BVS. Yes. And BVS was a hard watch for a lot of people. Okay. But the problem here is there was a reason. It followed off of Man of Steel. And so the context was that the world, when they see you and you're revealed to the world, you're going to be looked at as a controversial figure. People are going to see you as public enemy number one. Some people, other people see you as heroes, but you'll be divisive. It won't be no straight cut, straightforward thing, right? And so as a result of that, there's context, there's a layer, there's something there to build upon. In James Gunn's Superman movie, there's nothing, there's no context, he gives you a written line off, and then that's it. You're off to the races. And here's how I'm going to condition you. This Superman gets his ass beat all the time. He needs help all the time. You know? And that's a context for James Gunn to have fun with the Superman and to beat him up and do all the things he wanted to do to Superman. Right? Because for James Gunn, these comic book characters are a joke. He's a comedian, okay? They're a joke to him. They're not real. They're stupid. They're ridiculous, right? So he's going to be ridiculous, and he's going to ridicule Superman every chance he gets, just like Joss Whedon did with the DC characters. And the difference between DC and Marvel is you could get away with that with Marvel because most of the characters that they make jokes with are minor characters. But you'll never see Marvel make a joke about Captain America. They hold Captain America very sacred. They'll make a joke about Iron Man. They'll make a joke about Ant-Man or Spider-Man. But they're not going to make a joke about Captain America. Do you know why? Because Marvel understands certain characters are sacred. Certain characters are to be respected. As much as I'm going to do a parody here on some of these characters, or James Gunn, who does a lot of parodies on Star-Lord, Peacemaker, these are parodies of the thing. This is not the real Peacemaker. Of course, he was successful with it, so the comics are now going to start to reflect that parody. But the point is that you have to respect the characters. And what he's doing is disrespecting Superman. That's why some people are very offended, and that's why they're very disappointed. And Richard Donner spoke about this, and he spoke about having something called verisimilitude. Verisimilitude is something where the characters have to believe, they have to believe the reality that they're in. I'm going to create a reality. It's going to be a little fake. But the characters need to believe that reality is real to sell to you that this is real what you're watching at. Like, for example, if Christopher Reeve doesn't believe he's flying, then you're not going to believe he's flying. No matter how much tech, no matter how much advanced, apparatus that's there, if he doesn't believe he's flying, you won't believe he's flying. And in this movie, which is Superman, even though he says it's magical and all of that, and that's cool and well and good, and how he used the lens to create that magic, in spite of all of that, the more important thing to understand is the characters in that movie need to believe what's happening in that movie. The unrealistic thing needs to feel realistic. It needs to feel real. And this is the thing Zack Snyder also captures in what is called hyperrealism. Hyperrealism is something that's not real but looks extremely real. It's like doing pictures, of flowers, a flower arrangement, and you can't tell if that's a photo or if it's a picture. That's hyperrealism. Hyperrealism is supposed to deceive you into thinking this is possible. This actually can happen. Well, in the same vein, Richard Donner was pushing something like that. He was pushing, this is real. Uh, the instead of calling it hyperrealism, he's talking about similitude. Very, very similitude, which is not hyperrealism. It's where the characters in the movie believe what is happening to be real. That's important. It's not a joke, and that takes away the parody aspect of it. If you look at Richard Donner's movie, when Christopher Reeve is Clark Kent, he's a bumbling guy, but you can see that is a act, and he's playing that act. Okay, no matter how silly he may behave and funny he may behave, you see the serious side of the act. He pulls back the veil, like when Louis Lane was shot with the bullet and he caught the bullet. You see him pull back the veil for a minute, right? So it's the veil. When we saw Lex Luthor in BVS, as much as he behaved clownish somewhat, you saw him pull back the veil, and then you saw who Lex Luthor really is. You saw him when Batman interrogated him in prison, and then after that, you saw what he was really, right? A raging, angry, vengeful person, right? Who had daddy issues, right? So the point behind it is, if you are simply, if you're simply playing out characters to get jokes out of them, which is what a parody is. A parody is a jokey version of a actual movie, right? Or actual character, right? So, you have all kinds of parodies, all right? But the point is that Richard Donner avoided the parody because, why is that? Because he said, it's extremely important that the characters in the story believe themselves, and the minute they didn't, like I said, it becomes a parody. So it's very critical. Now, when you look at Superman in the Superman movie, does he believe that he is capable of dealing with the situations at hand? And the other thing is, okay, in Aquaman, for example, there's the director's self-awareness that this is a movie and doesn't have to take itself seriously. In Superman, the director clearly does not care to have Superman depicted in a strong way, as he's a strong man. Superman is a strong man, right? So he has to be strong, right? But he undercuts Superman's strength with Crypto. He undercuts Superman's strength when they're healing him. He undercuts Superman's strength when he gets his ass kicked by just about everything. The clone, the kaiju, the engineer, etc., 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 right? He's getting his ass kicked. The key point here is this. If we cannot believe, you remember the credits rolled before and said that Superman is the strongest being in the universe, right? Strongest man in the universe, whatever. But that writing is not true, because when we see Superman, he's not the strongest guy in the movie. In other words, if the character of Superman, the character that's being played, does not believe he's the strongest guy in that movie, it's a parody. And that's what Richard Donner was talking about. That when you look at James Gunn's Superman, James Gunn's Superman doesn't believe that he's the strongest in that particular universe. He doesn't believe it. And he doesn't show strength in terms of leadership. He does not show strength in terms of command of respect, right? He doesn't show that. He doesn't have any aura of respect. The dog doesn't care about him. Kara jokes about him. Lex Luthor doesn't give a damn about him, even if he rages. You know, you look at it, he's like, you know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of the interaction between Joker and Batman. Batman was raging and raging and raging, and the Joker just kept on laughing at him. The Joker doesn't see him as a threat or as something to be respected. And I think similarly, Superman in this movie is not seen as someone to be respected. In fact, the common people start disrespecting him. They're throwing things at him. They're not afraid that if he gets hit in the head, he would do them something, you know? So this is the whole point behind it. Superman's being bullied all the time. And I know in Man of Steel there are moments where people bully him and stuff, but you feel like, because you see his strength, you see him crush the support system, on the fencing. He doesn't want to strike back. You know, he's holding back. The thing about Superman is he's very, very powerful. He's indestructible. When we see Superman, his bones are broken and all this stuff. That's not Superman. That's some other guy. But it's not Superman. Superman is not human. He's not human. So if he's an alien, he's not going to have broken bones like everybody else. I think the thing about it is, I think James Gunn decided to take down Superman's power level to a level where it's like, I gotta be real with you, MCU level. So he made Superman into an MCU alien, right? So he could have broken bones and he needs to be healed back. And even though the logic behind it is ridiculous. I mean, Superman's cells can absorb sunlight. They don't need to concentrate that to heal him back and all that, but whatever. The point is, he depowered Superman so he can make jokes off of him and so he can beat him up. All right? And it's weird because they claim that Zack Snyder hated Superman, right? But apparently James Gunn, who has made public statements about how he feels about superheroes, publicly said, and he's acting on it. And even Joss Whedon, another guy who has denigrated superheroes, particularly he denigrates women. You see what he did to Wonder Woman, right? You saw what he did to Black Widow with the Hulk, right? And my point being, these guys' approach to superheroes is to get a laugh out of them. It's to show how stupid comic book movies are and how stupid comic books are. I think that's what they're going for all the time. And show that comic books are not to be taken seriously, which is, again, something that I personally think comic books are a reflection of our times, are a reflection of our pop culture. So for me, somebody saying something like that really doesn't understand comic books. Comic books are about adventures. Comic books are not hee hee ha ha things. People always like to put comedy into comic books because they try to poke fun of comics. Because they're trying to say that comic books are not literature. They're not literature like Tom Sawyer. They're not literature like, Shakespeare. This is the way I would look at it. It's looked down upon. And comic book writers are looked down upon. And for years, this is the perception of comic books because they say comic books are really for kids. Kids read comic books. No, that's not true. Not anymore. The people who mostly read comic books are a lot older. And so it's really interesting to see. What you'll find is kids will play with the comic book toys. Kids will play with Comic books now in the digital media, that's not a thing. Kids generally look anime now. They're not even into comic books anymore. They're into anime. So you find a lot of them, the generations, millennials and Generation Z and Generation Y, they all are more into anime than comic books now. But the point anyway is that these characters have to be taken seriously. And Richard Donner took Superman seriously. The movie had comedy in it, but he made sure that the sacredness of Superman, that the respect given to Superman was there. That's something that James Gunn just didn't do. And he would use the guys that Superman's inexperienced to beat him up. Okay? Zack Snyder's the same thing. He said, because I made Superman real. I made him feel, and I made consequences in the world. I think the thing with what Zack did was take the lens off of Superman from afar and personalize Superman. And what James Gunn did was he looked at tropes of Superman. I believe they used AI technology to garner that. He used tropes of Superman that fans call for, and he's doing fan service to them. He said, oh, you want to see Superman save this person and save that person, save a cat out of the tree, save a squirrel, save a dog, save a human being. So let's do that. So he does that. He puts that into his ingredients. What do you want? Superman with trunks on the outside? Fine. Hugging up children? Fine. Right? So he's kind of going through a checklist and ticking off things that people have been asking for years. That's how he's fan servicing Superman to the people, but yet he's crafting a non-Superman entity, a Star-Lord entity, and but he's giving people what they want. Oh, you want a Superman with trunks? You want a Superman that kind of looks like classical Superman? Okay. You want a Superman that helps kids? Okay. You want a Superman that people seem to love and adore, and there's no problems. The world's kind of perfect when it comes to that. Okay, Superman saving a squirrel, a dog, a cat, a rat, right? He's going around saving people, and I gave him hopeful music, right? So he's servicing that area while he's destroying other areas of Superman. You understand? But Zack made people feel. It wasn't pleasant feelings all the time, which is why they say it's a dark Superman. Made people feel and understand what it would be like to have that kind of power and that kind of responsibility, and how you'd have to act in accordance, and why you have to have the right people raising you to be able. And these people are what the beautiful thing about Superman is. What it's saying is, Middle America. These are the values of Middle America. I don't know if that's the same. If today the values of Middle America are the same, but this is the values of Middle America, and he sort of sculpts that so beautifully with Kevin Costner and with Superman's mom on Earth, and makes a very beautiful story, And James Gunn now, I guess he's coming from his experience with his parents, if he had parenting at all, and he's taking the aspect of Middle America that has to do with more people who come from the trailer parks, put them in a house, and the father sort of tries to, the words that the father used, you have to know yourself and you have to follow your own path, is basically what he uses in there to summarize that. But it's a rehash of what Zack Snyder's Superman did with a lot. Zack Snyder was more detailed on that. So he's trying to use certain aspects of Man of Steel, for example, use different aspects of Superman 1978. Of course, he's got this algorithm, this AI that's kind of troubleshooting what would vibe with audiences and so on. So this is what they're using. They're sort of scientifically trying to engineer a movie that, even though it doesn't make any sense, it will vibe with the audience a certain way, because it's about feelings for James Gunn. James Gunn wants to appeal to the more unintelligent agencies of emotion. He's trying to appeal to your emotion and not to your logic and reasoning. And he's trying to also give fans something that they asked for, or at least a certain set of fans asked for, Superman fans. Okay? So that's what That's the whole strategy he's using. And now I see him even because he kind of did the, you know, wealthy nation versus the poor nation sort of thing. You see people drawing comparisons between Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Palestine. The only problem with that is the nuance involved in there. Why is Superman involved in that? Which side has he picked to be on the side of why? And that's what Lewis Lane was trying to uh, dig out of him, you know? So I thought that the problem with these kinds of storytelling is that it tricks people. And I don't believe in doing that. Tricks people into believing this is Superman because I give you X, Y, and Z. But that's not what Superman is. You see what I'm saying? So that's the thing that a lot of people, and I hear a lot of people say it looks like a comic book movie. It's very comic book movie-ish. They also say things like, James Gunn is pulling directly from the comics, classical Superman, all this kind of bullshit. And it's not true. It's just he's giving you what you wanted to see on the screen. And so now you're embellishing it with all these lies. It's kind of like with Matt Reeves, the Batman, where he sold the idea that Batman's not killing anyone. It's a lie. He killed people in the movie, but they're selling the idea that he didn't kill anyone. That's the selling point because the fans said, we don't want a Batman that kills. Ben Affleck's Batman kills. It's a terrible thing. Batman has a no-kill rule. He doesn't use guns. Blah, 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 blah. So these are like, okay, we hear you. But those people who are saying all of this, they're vocal, but they're a minority. Just like the Superman fans that are very vocal about, Henry Cavill's Superman and his dark Superman depiction and blah, 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 blah. When in fact is a much more realistic depiction of Superman. So the question is, if Superman was to appear in the world today, how would we react to him? Which to me is much more interesting than talking about some sort of fantasy Superman in a world where superheroes are already there. And on top of that, this Superman is getting his ass kicked all the time. There's nothing interesting about that. And he still has the truth, justice, American way. He's trying to save the cat out of the tree, save this one, save that one. It's cool. Nobody's saying no. That's cool. But we have a problem. He has a temper problem. He has a problem being challenged. That's not Superman. He has to always get help to solve things. He can't do it on his own. That's not Superman. And we're dropped into it. So this is what I'm talking about with Superman. He doesn't have really good leadership skills. He has to be helped out all the time. He's kind of like a beta male, right? He's kind of effeminate in that he throws his hands up in the air and he behaves, he throws a tyrant, he throws a tantrum. That sort of thing is something you would see in a teenager. And it's so ironic that they say that that Zack Snyder's Superman was emo Superman. The maturity of Zack Snyder's Superman to deal with certain situations and show so much restraint is the incredible thing. Now they say, I was listening to my boy, what's his name? I forgot what his name is. Comedian guy. And he's saying, I see what they say about this Superman, how, Zack Snyder's Superman didn't show no emotion. He wasn't really helping anybody. And, Zack Snyder's, but this Superman shows emotion and stuff. So yelling, screaming, and shouting on the screen is the way. That's that. And again, this Marvel indoctrination of stupidity in people. People get dumber and dumber and dumber, and they can't assess things unless explicitly shown that stoicism and nuance is lost by this generation of, dumbed down, stupid people. They're supposed to be intelligent, but they're not. And that's sad. I was hearing Middle Eastern thing talking about Superman and, it reflected Palestine and Israel. And I'm like, okay, it does, but Do we really go into detail about that? Do we delve into it? Do we understand why Superman's on the side of whichever team? And is that team behaving more like said Israel instead of the big powerful nation supposedly? You have to ask yourself these questions. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm picking a side. That's Palestine." No, that's being dumb. That's being naive. That's being stupid. And that's the problem with there's no critical thinking skills really. They're just people who they turn off their brain and they, oh, look at all this action. It's action packed. Oh yeah. So it's an action movie. Okay. Great. Is there anything else involved there? So I said quite a lot, a handful, and I wanted to go into that because you see, a lot of times, um, I see people talking all kinds of dumb shit. Remember when they used to say Henry Cavill, he doesn't smile in Man of Steel? Now, to be honest with you, Henry Cavill is an amazing actor, and he's been in a lot of successful films of late, especially budget wise. And yeah, okay, he doesn't smile all that much in the Superman movie, Man of Steel. Did Brandon Routh smile a lot in Superman Returns? No. Did Christopher Reeve smile a lot in Superman 3 and 4? No. Supergirl smile a lot in her movie? No. So why is it you think he needs to smile a lot? And I'll tell you what. What they really mean is the movie's not light, meaning it doesn't have a lot of jokes in it. It's not, it's not taking itself too seriously. That's what they mean. When they talk about this Superman is darker, Henry Cavill's Superman. Henry Cavill's Superman is not darker. The movie's more serious. That doesn't make it darker. You have comedies, and then you have serious movies. And Man of Steel was a serious movie. That doesn't make it darker. Darker is, do you even know what darker means? Darker means demented. It means without light. It means bleak. Man of Steel wasn't bleak. Man of Steel was real. It was a very real movie. Realistic. Or shall I say hyper realistic? Because obviously, as far as we know, human beings can't fly. So that's a little bit out there. Superman has super strength as well. The Kryptonians had super strength. So as far as we know, it may be possible, but as far as we know, there are no aliens among us. And even if they are, they haven't revealed themselves to us like how Superman and the Kryptonians revealed themselves to the Earth. So that's the cool thing about Man of Steel. The circumstances under it are serious circumstances. They're real circumstances. They're like real world circumstances. The threat is real. And Zack made you feel that. You realize. And that's why people said they were so concerned about all the people that died in Metropolis after Superman fought General Zod. I mean, a lot of people still can't process that this is a realistic take on, say, for example, the Avengers, where everything works out peachy clean, mass destruction in the city, but nobody's dead for some reason because some stupid character, some stupid superhero character says, "Oh, evacuate the people from this area." Like they could just do that in 2 minutes, right? You see also the stupidity in even this Superman movie. You see the massive destruction that's happening. Massive amounts of people died in that incident with Superman versus wherever he was fighting, the Kaiju, the other thing. There's massive destruction. But again, the movie doesn't focus on that. It doesn't focus on consequence. It doesn't focus on what's really going on. BVS shows you from a human perspective the damage that was caused. And the whole point behind it is Zack said, even though it's a comic book movie, you need to understand the consequence. That way you can understand the scope and strength of a superpowered being. Now, Marvel didn't have that problem so much because Marvel's heroes or superheroes are not as powerful as Superman, not as powerful as a Kryptonian, not as powerful as Darkseid or the Old Gods or Wonder Woman, or, they're not as powerful. James Gunn decided to depower Superman because that's how he knows to deal with Marvel characters. They're not as powerful as DC characters are. And these are all very important points. DC has to go deep. You know where Superman's weaknesses are in his movie? His attachment to humanity. That he cares so much for humanity. That's where Superman's weakness lies. But James Gunn will tell you, no, Superman's physically weak as well. That's why he needs humanity to help him. In fact, Superman's a human being, even though he's an alien. Somehow he's a human as well. James Gunn will blur that line because he's trying to physically make you feel that he's human instead of emotionally feel and rope him in that he's human. And he will play with the emotional strings of you to make you feel, oh, look at Crypto, look at how he saved the squirrel. Oh, look how look how the children push him on. He's the guy that helped him out, that kind of thing. So, he's seen amongst people as accepted, but it conveys that to you because the world already is not real. In no world would people just turn against you just like that, right? Superman's been helping people for many, many years, and they just turn on him for 3 years, and they just turn on him because of this, and no critical thinking whatsoever, and they turn on him, and this is when, on hearing the message that Lex Luthor shares about him, his family. And all I'm saying is that there's a lot of unrealistic things. You have to suspend your reality. Of course, this is James Gunn's movies it's not realistic in any way, shape, or form. So you can forget about that. And he does that to be able to shape the story he wants. He has more freedom to shape a story. Because it's easy to write a story where it's not governed by moments where you have to get, emotional beats and, pondering, self-reflective beats. He doesn't like that kind of stuff, right? So, and he doesn't have the talent or ability to bring that up forth. So that is why you see the Superman movie as it is. Now let's get into what we're supposed to be dealing with. This is not it. There we go. 7 things Man of Steel did better than Superman movie. Okay, and this is written by Nicholas Ayala. While James Gunn's Superman avoids many of Man of Steel's flaws and explores other aspects of the hero, Zack Snyder's first DCU installment has plenty of strengths that remain unmatched. James Gunn's Superman stays closer to its titular hero's traditional tone than Man of Steel. I disagree with that, but that's okay. Again, when you say Superman's original tone, what are you talking about? Traditional tone in terms of movies, maybe? Are you talking about in terms of movies? That, the tone of the movie? Because if you're talking about comic books, Zach's right on par with most of them. With a much more down-to-earth personality and more colorful world around Kal-El. Again, the dude is literally being literal, He's saying it's a much more colorful world around Kal-El. So I guess, once again, these bright colors. Oh, James Gunn's giving you these bright colors, man. He's giving you bright colors. It's so superficial and stupid, but it is what it is. And down-to-earth personality. I don't think that Superman and again, I haven't seen the movie, But from what I've seen, he doesn't seem down to earth to me. Yelling and screaming and bawling at people like Star-Lord doesn't feel down to earth to me. It shows you don't have communication skills. That's all it says. David Cornsworth portrays Superman as a more approachable hero who isn't afraid to come across as knave for the greater good. Again, I understand because people are helping Superman out of holes and kids are praying for Superman and that kind of stuff, and he's hugging kids and whatever, that they would say he's more approachable. But Henry Cavill's Superman, throughout all the movies that we have seen, is approachable. The problem isn't that he's not approachable. The problem is that the world sees him in a certain kind of way. Remember, this is a realistic take. People are not just going to take to you because because you are powerful and you're alien from another world, and you try to embrace them and you try to do things in their best interest. That doesn't mean people will take to you. And we see it time and time again with our leaders. A lot of people turn against their leadership. Okay? So while I understand what he means by down-to-earth personality because he moves amongst the people, this is a fictitious world in which the people turn on him on a drop of a dime because of Lex Luthor's information on him. And so I understand what James Gunn is trying to do, but once again, and that is something kind of like the comics, but once again, I do not think that the comic book world of Superman he is reflected necessarily. I do understand what this guy is saying, but I don't necessarily agree with it. Okay. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel kicked off the DCU on a much more controversial note than James Gunn's Superman launched the DCU. I disagree with that again. Obviously, I don't think the movie was much of anything, and I think a lot of other people don't think that the movie is much of anything. I think it's a very it splits the fandom down the center. Some people like it, some people hate it. So no, I think James Gunn once again has made a divisive movie. That said, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel offers a unique take on Superman on the big screen, and many of its qualities are worth appreciating years later. Now, this movie's been around for 12 years, and Man of Steel doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. It's still one of those big movies. It outperformed Superman. So far, it's been outperforming Superman. Man of Steel's Jor-El and Lara Lorvan are faithful to the source material. Some iterations of Superman's parents care little about Earth and see it as a last resort for their species' survival. Others genuinely want Earth to be the inheritor of Krypton's legacy. The thing about it is, in Superman's parents behave like General Zod, pretty much. The future of Krypton is what they care about, and they don't really care about the Earthlings. And in most iterations of Superman, whether live action iterations of Superman, regardless of TV or film, they've had Jor-El interested in Superman surviving on Earth, but coexisting with humanity in peace and being able probably to help them in ways that maybe somebody from outside could do because they appreciate what they're in. Superman's most controversial plot point might be the L's apparent wish to send Kal-El to Earth as a conqueror instead of a savior. So James Gunn decided, I'm gonna flip this, right? The thing about it is, it takes away the Jesus aspect of Superman because, if you do Jor-El sending his only son into the world to try and help save the world, that's sort of a Jesus messianic sort of mission. However, if you're doing it as like a General Zod like Jor-El sent to Earth, Superman to conquer it. Now again, I get what James Gunn could be doing here. He didn't get to elaborate, but he's talking about like Zionism. He's talking about the counter of messianism, or the cornerstone of Christianity, or messianic messages. Instead of being messianic, now we're talking about being Zionistic, or being colonial settlership. So whereas General Zod was the representative of colonial settlements, um, we see Jarrell now and Laura Van being the instigators of colonial settlism. And again, James Gunn didn't explore this in much detail. He just kind of threw it out there. Maybe for a future Superman movie, maybe he could talk about Kal-El's wrestling with that. He didn't address it in the movie. Kal-El never addressed it. So it's just very interesting about that. But I'm sure if he had a longer version, he'd probably address it, if he hadn't already. But that controversial take, yeah, Man of Steel basically holds true to the classical Jor-El and Laura Van. While the DCU's bold take on Superman's Kryptonian parents seems inspired by Flashpoint Beyond, it isn't how Jor-El and Laura Van are usually depicted. Correct. And it also kind of, sort of takes away from the Superman lore. Because if you had this family, this biological family out there that wanted Kal-El to integrate and be an asset to humanity, and of course in Man of Steel, we see Jor-El's memories and all of that stuff, speaking to Superman, instructing him forward. So that's how he knew who he was, because of Jor-El. So if that missing footage in Superman is to be taken at face value, now it could be that it got corrupted, yes, or it could be that Jor-El corrupted that part and decided they had to change of heart, he and Laura Van, and they could retcon it in the sense that that's why it was corrupted. They erased that, right? And they just wanted Kal-El to grow up and survive. So maybe it started off with something stupid like that. Anyway, anyhow you take it, James Gunn is putting in there his own view on what Jor-El would be. So it's really his mind we're seeing there. And it's interesting what he says. He says, conquer Earth and fuck as many women as possible. And I'm thinking, James Gunn is trying to conquer the comic book industry. And in the meantime, he's trying to fuck as many women as possible. You know what I'm saying? And underage women. So in a way, it's a projection of James Gunn and how he feels about things that you're seeing in the Superman. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel makes it clear that Kal-El's Kryptonian parents truly believe their son could be Krypton's last hope and Earth's salvation. And remember, the glyph on Superman's chest means hope, which, again, depth. There's so much depth to Zack Snyder's films. What the fuck does a glyph on a Superman's chest in Superman mean? I have no fucking idea. They fought to ensure Kal had free will, another very important thing. And Jor-El left Kal a codex that would later serve as his mentor. Jor-El's final gift to Superman in Man of Steel might be one of the best descriptions of Kal-El's mission. And this is from Superman, All-Star Superman. You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards. They will race behind you. They will stumble. They will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun, Kal. In time, you'll help them accomplish wonders. Which is very inspirational. That is hope right there, in a nutshell. Man of Steel and Superman's reinvention of both sets of Superman parents go against the traditional I think you mean Superman's reinvention of both sets of Superman's reinvention of Superman's parents go against the traditional image of Jor-El and Laura Van. and Jonathan and Martha Kent, respectively. Now, let me just say, in Man of Steel, Jonathan Kent, what he says to Kal-El, or shall I say to Clark, is definitely in line with the comics. You know, people like to say, oh, you're supposed to show your skills, show your ability to the world, develop your skills and abilities. No. In Superman issue #1, Jonathan Kent says to little Kal-El, you need to keep your strengths a secret because the world would fear you and then they will attack you, right? This is because this was in light of he was in the adoption agency. They adopted him and they were like, thank goodness, because he was wreaking havoc inside the adoption agency, okay? So they adopted him. However, while controversial, they're both valid reinterpretations. The Jonathan and Martha Kent issue, like I said before, is literally from the comics. Okay. The Jor-El and Lara Lorvan is not in comic media. I believe it's in television media. You will find it in Smallville. Well, not exactly the way how James Gunn did it, but there's versions of it. You know, evil Jor-El, that kind of thing. And evil Jor-El wants to conquer the world, you know. Kind of like, you know, Invincible, right? So it kind of, you know, James Gunn tries to go like the Invincible route there. The former presents a more distant kind of love from Pa Kent, and the latter underlines Superman's values and his decision to be more human than Kryptonian, right? I don't know about that. I think Jonathan and Martha Kent, the way how they train him is to deal with his powers, one, to have restraint, two, and I guess that's it, because he had to have restraint. You can't always help people, especially if it means revealing yourself to everyone. And Zack Snyder did a really good piece on that, and I'll try and get to that. Actually, let me get to it right now. In Twitter, Zach really explains it really well. Let me see if I can find it. I should have it somewhere here. Hold on one second. I would think I would bookmark it. I know I hold on one second. Let me see if I can find it. It's 4:37 already. Oh, this is taking. Wait, hold on. I think this is it here. Nope. Maybe I have it. Maybe I don't have it. Ah, here it is. Okay, here we go.
He says, I let my father die.
Okay.
The conversation is exactly what he says to Lois. He says, I let my father die to protect the idea that my father was trying to protect, the idea that, like, I wasn't ready to be, like, outed to the world because I wasn't Superman. I was like a teenager that kind of, like, I could have made a mess of it. I have the power to do it, but, like, had I ever used my powers in those way? Did I know exactly how to do it? No. I want to say my dad, but I also trusted him that his vision for what I could be was bigger than him or I, or, you know, this little incident in Kansas was not the thing that was going to sort of expose me to the world. And because on the moment I'm exposed to the world, I have to be at the peaks of my powers because the world is not going to sit around and rejoice my existence. That's probably not what's going to happen. And I think that's what Jonathan's point of view was. The world is going to be afraid of you, and the world is going to there's a really good chance that you're going to become the enemy because you make us feel too insignificant. And when we feel that way, we get afraid.
Everybody worried about a mid-credit scene or post-credit scene
Get
for
up
the
and
movie?
leave.
Leave. Save yourself the time. It's a nothing burger and a bag of chips. And the chips are stale.
It's just an after credit scene.
It does, Tori, you're missing the point. On the spectrum of after credit scenes, you could have done anything better.
That goes back to your expectations.
Stop wasting the audience's money when they sit in the theater to go see your shit. Stop trying to justify it, Tori.
It's not
It's just a bad scene.
Yep. One guy said Clark could have saved Jonathan. Yes, but then what happens after that? And I think this was something that a lot of people, had a problem with, that Clark didn't save Jonathan. They had a problem in BVS that Jimmy Olsen was killed, and some people say Zach is doing that to piss off fanboys. I don't think so. I think it's a natural progression. Jonathan told Clark, that you have to keep this side of yourself a secret. If you're revealed to the world too soon and you don't even know who you are, you don't know where you come from, that could go south real fast. If people really know what's really going on. And the parents were successful in keeping him a secret, more or less. Like, people couldn't verifiably say, oh, this guy, something about him is different. He's an alien or something. They don't know that, right? So why they're trying to protect him. They don't want, it's like baby Moses, which was hidden, in the bushes. And then, Pharaoh's daughter saw him. And next thing, he was in the house of Pharaoh. And nobody realizes he's an Israelite. You know what I mean? So it's like trying to move underneath the radar as long as you can until you're ready to come out from under the radar. I notice even after, Clark comes out from under the radar and reveals himself to the world, he doesn't reveal himself to the world as Clark Kent. Not that stupid. The world already knows from General Zod his name is Kal-El. They know his Kryptonian name. They don't know his Earth name, right? And so he comes out from that and he reveals to the world his Kryptonian, arraignment. And he's dressed differently, of course, and he's flying and he's using all his powers then. But throughout his career, Clark keeps that side of himself a secret. And that's what's so cool about Superman. You actually, in Man of Steel, you were able to, they gave you an explanation for why Clark Kent never came out as Clark Kent to the world with powers. That's what makes it so. Man of Steel is such a well thought out film. And David Goyer really did a great job. And Christopher Nolan sharpened up stuff. And then Zack Snyder did the direction. And I'm going to tell you, Man of Steel is a hell of a film because it gives explanations for almost everything that has to do with every aspect of Superman. No, because we never had a Superman origin film. We never had it. And Man of Steel is the Superman origin film. It's solid, and it's sad that James Gunn didn't even build on that. I know Superman and Lewis built on that, but James Gunn decided, no, I ain't doing nothing like Zack Snyder. I'm doing everything in the opposite, and he has an opposite philosophy and everything. And so we get this movie, Superman. But I thought I would share that with you because as we were discussing this point here on Screen Rant, it shows you that, again, Zach is thinking from a human perspective about the obstacles that are involved. Man of Steel's opening scene provides better context for the main plot, of course. It shows you Krypton going down in ruins, and Jor-El having his last minute measures to ensure the continuation of the Kryptonian race. And Superman is a refugee, So it really emphasizes the point of refugee. I don't think any other version of Superman. We had the Superman version with Marlon Brando and even General Zod and Company Limited, how they were prosecuted and then sent to the Phantom Zone. It's more, shall I say, it's more fantastical in Superman 1978 and 1980 as well. But when you look at Man of Steel, it gives you kind of concrete, real case scenario, and why it was so important that Kal-El left and how much in jeopardy he was because of the idea that Jor-El presented about him being the hope of Krypton, and how he even managed to escape Zod and all of that. So it's quite an interesting story. Krypton's destruction is always referred to as a tragedy, but few iterations of the event manage to capture its intensity. In Man of Steel's opening sequence, not a single Kryptonian wins. The Kryptonian Council meet their end after ignoring Jor-El's pleas. Jor-El and Lara realize that Krypton will die. They soon lose their own son. Druzad can barely bear his frustration over being captured and sentenced, yet he acknowledges that Jor-El was right about the Council. Man of Steel shows a more realistic depiction of Superman's battles. 100%. 100%. Batman v Superman only improves on Man of Steel's established in regards to Metropolis Black Zero event. Apart from on-screen victims of the catastrophe, off-screen onlookers witness their offices and homes crumble with loved ones still inside. The DCU's attention to detail is key in its accurate depiction of a history-defining event that could have brushed off as simply action sequences otherwise, which is what you get in Superman and in most Marvel movies. Superman's first DCEU battle completely upends the world's perspective, which is really, really important. Man of Steel's script is tighter than Superman's, no doubt about it. Well thought out script as well. They talk about, James Gunn's Superman is accessible to all audiences, but is better enjoyed if viewers have a firm grasp on DC mythology and understand the comic book origins of its many moving gears. The problem with that is, what they're basically saying is, James Gunn's Superman movie doesn't have any backstory to nothing. Even though he's got characters there, he never introduces the characters. He just throws them in. So you don't really know what the DC lore for that movie is. You kind of have to go back onto DC lore. James Gunn has some very obscure characters that are not the main characters in DC that he pulled from. And he pulled these obscure characters so that you can't say, oh, he's bent this character this way and he's bent that character that way. That's what James Gunn likes to use, obscure characters to tell a story. As a result, Snyder's Man of Steel can stand alone as an origin story with a complete emotional arc, while also logically explaining why Cable's Superman in later appearances would carry a heavier, more solemn demeanor comparable to traditional depictions. Again, when you say traditional depictions, are you talking about movies? And even if you're talking about movies, Superman Returns was a pretty serious movie. That was actually a pretty dark movie, if you think about it. So what are you really saying? Because Superman Returns, Superman was pretty solemn in that movie. Meanwhile, James Gunn's Superman is accessible to all audiences, but it's better enjoyed if the viewers have a firm grasp of DC mythology. No, it's not a complete film. There's no complete story arcs. There's nothing complete about it. Superman, the way how you met Superman in the beginning of the movie is the way how Superman remains at the end of the movie. It's kind of like Captain America with flaws. He doesn't grow. And that's the problem with Marvel. Marvel's characters don't grow, especially the ones they try to hold sacred. Man of Steel's score is more emotional than Superman's. That's true. What else we got here? Man of Steel's flying sequences are more epic than Superman's. That is true. Michael Shannon's General Zod is way scarier than Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor. In fact, I would argue that Jesse Eisenberg's depiction of Lex Luthor is better than Nicholas Holt's depiction of Lex Luthor. Because again, I as sort of as kind of animated as Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor was and clownish, it seems, at no point in time is he ever assaulted by anyone. He's not touched. He's the untouchable guy. And if you think about Lex Luthor, most of the time Lex Luthor is untouchable, right? And the other cool thing about it is, whereas in Batman v Superman, Superman saves Lex Luthor from getting slaughtered by Doomsday. In Superman, we see the absolute opposite. Superman's supposed comrade in Crypto starts just annihilating Lex Luthor, and Superman does nothing to stop Crypto. Nothing. He just yells at him. So the absolute opposite what we saw in BVS, where Lex Luthor deserved to get annihilated by Doomsday, Superman intervened to protect Lex Luthor. We just don't see that with Superman and Crypto, with Lex Luthor there. So this is the thing I'm trying to say, that, when you really look at Man of Steel, you literally look at the actions of Superman in Man of Steel, BVS, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. He's a stand-up guy, guardian to protect, people of the world. And that's where James Gunn doesn't do a good job. When it really counts, Superman can't protect the world. That's why it's not Superman. Superman is capable of protecting the world. Right? He's the first line of defense for the world. He leads the Justice League. You don't see leadership qualities in this version of Superman. You don't see him as somebody we can have confidence in, that he'll protect the world, because he's not capable of that. And that's what James Gunn did to this Superman. To play a monster of a villain with no possibility of redemption and still convey complexities in a high-octane superhero movie is a feat few actors can boast. Despite his rigid sense of duty, General Zod genuinely embraces his role as Earth's destroyer. Zod's hatred for Jor-El and Kal-El is a personal grudge he holds on top of his life's singular purpose. And when he realizes there's no possibility of winning, Zod's realization that he no longer has a reason to exist is visibly painful. Like Heath Ledger's Joker and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, Zod is undeniably malevolent, yet Shannon also conveys moments of deep personal torment. I like the nuance of Zack Snyder's villains. You look at Steppenwolf. All Steppenwolf wants is acceptance. Back to his world, right? He wants acceptance. But he's devastating, diabolical, versed in war, warrior. He's also very intimidating. So these different aspects of a character, you get all this dimension to the character in Zack Snyder's villains. You look at General Zod, very intimidating as well. You don't get that feeling with Nicholas Holt's rendition of Lex Luthor. While he's not intimidated by Superman, he's also not very intimidating, period. His actions are not very intimidating. And he has no nuance. He's not, the word I'm looking for is, he's not really clever. His plans are dumb, Michael Shannon's nuanced performance also reframes Superman's controversial decision to kill Zod. In Man of Steel's climax, Superman recognizes that Zod is following the only purpose he knows, meaning that there's no peaceful resolution. Zod's cruelty is hardwired into his very being, which justifies Superman's heartbreaking choice to end his life. To play a monster of a villain with no possibility of redemption and still convey complexities in a high-octane superhero movie is a feat few actors can boast. Yeah, General Zod, he's not a guy that just bends to somebody else's will. He's very convicted in what he's doing, and he'll see it through to the end, So those are the 7 things Man of Steel did better than Superman, and there's probably several others. I think Man of Steel is a much better film. I think that most people will will admit that. Even detractors of Zack Snyder's Snyderverse will tell you Man of Steel is a better film than Superman that we saw. and they were, some of them bemoaned, which is really funny to hear because they're detractors. Some of them bemoaned the fact that the Snyderverse wasn't continued, that at least Zack Snyder's vision and the continuation of his movies didn't happen. Because, quite frankly, I truly believe anytime they decide to put Zack Snyder's Justice League into cinemas, like seriously, and push it, it's gonna make money. Okay, that's a movie. That movie is how old? That movie now is 4 years. Well, it's supposed to have come out in 2017. So if you think about it that way, it's 8 years old, right? And an 8-year-old movie to go into cinemas and to just kill it. The moment Warner Brothers does that, they're gonna make money. They're gonna make money. They're gonna make money. You know. Um, they got two secret weapons at their disposal anytime they're ready to pull the trigger, and it can really reverse a lot of things. One is putting Zack Snyder's Justice League into cinemas, and the second one is the air cut. The air cut's like something that you know a lot of people want to go see. So if they put the air cut into cinemas, I mean that would kill. It would kill. It will slay, and it would be also epic because again, in the history of cinema, you've not really had directors' true vision put into theaters after the fact of something else happening. So they have two major weapons just sitting down there. Warner Bros. Just has them sitting down there that could bail out the studio tomorrow in terms of $1 billion movies. Now, I'm not saying that Zack Snyder's Justice League would necessarily make $1 billion, but I'm telling you right now, the air cut would do something like that because it's in demand. Nobody's seen it. You know, Zack Snyder's Justice League has been seen. It's available, on HBO Max and so on. So it would make money. Don't get me wrong. People will go to see that movie in theaters. But the thing about it is, it's already been seen. It's just going for the theatrical experience, right? But the thing about it, if you put it in theaters, more people will be able to see it. So even though it's 4 to 8 years old, at least the version that we saw is 4 years old. But it's been made since 2017, so it's about 8 years old. Even though it's an 8-year-old movie, that movie's gonna kill. It's gonna make money. It's gonna make money. Like I said, I don't expect it to make money like Aircut. The Aircut's probably gonna make more money than Zack Snyder's Justice League. But if you put Zack Snyder's Justice League into theaters, into IMAX particularly, and you let it play for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you'll be shocked at the kind of money that thing will pull in. It'll pull in, I mean, serious dollars. Serious dollars. All you have to do is the promotion for it. It's already formatted for IMAX. Zack Snyder's done that already. He's put down all that groundwork. So it's just to put it out there. And you let it run for 2 weeks or you let it run for a week. You get something like $200 million, maybe $300 million. That's good money, 2-3 weeks, it makes maybe $200-300 million. That's good money because that's on top of the money you made for Justice League. So you could get the overall kume of it to get to close to, if not $1 billion. You'd be collecting that $1 billion in different times and different installments. But I'm just saying, if that movie, because remember, you're not going to be doing much. You're just putting out money for promotion and advertising, right? You may have to put out whatever you put out, all right? I wouldn't try to spend too much money on promotion and advertising. You're still at a deficit. But if that movie were to make $400 million, maybe even $500 million for the investment that you put out on it, and then you add everything up together, you look at your nets, you'll make back the money that you lost on Justice League. They'll clearly make back that money. You might have a little bit more money left over in profit. So I think it's something worth doing. And that's all contingent on Superman flopping, which it will, because you're talking about it needs to make up $735 million. I don't see it coming close to that. to break even. That's not even to make a profit. That's to break even. So I don't see that movie doing something like that. That's at the higher end. That's if the movie costs $363 million, as is speculated. If it's 225 million, as they Warner Brothers reported, I don't believe it, but let's say it's 225 million. They said the Flash was 200 and something million too. All right, let's say it's 225 million. Okay, fine. Then it has to make 563 million to break even. So whether it's the lower end, especially on the higher, this is just a break even. This is not this is not to make profit. Okay. So whichever way on the spectrum you look at it, it's a lot of money. You have to make like 600 million to make profit and upwards. So that's what we're talking about. So it's very unlikely that this movie would make that kind of money, but we're still gonna watch and see. Okay. Okay. I don't think I have much more to say here. I think that's about it for me. Let's have a look at some more stuff here. Okay. Movies and games related sets. Since some of you think that we want Zack Snyder for a universe, we would take other real filmmakers for a reboot universe like Denis Villeneuve, Christopher McQuarrie, Ryan Coogler, Joseph Kosinski. We want DC films, not DC movies of the weekend. Or shall I say, we don't want theme park rides. Keep on getting theme park rides. We're not looking for that. So I think if there's an alternative to the Snyderverse that's more appealing, we'll take it. Of course, we'll move on. The thing is, nothing that Warner Bros. Has presented so far has been able to compete with Zack Snyder's, first three movies of the DCEU and Wonder Woman. This happened. Critically, they've done well, but a lot of these critical successes were flops. You know, critically, James Gunn's Superman movie did well, but nobody gives a fuck about that. It's about box office. If we're going to get sequels, if we're going to get follow-up universe movies, and I just don't see it doing well box office wise. I don't, and that's just me. I don't know. We'll see. The most recent information on what's going on with James Gunn's Superman movie. Hold on a second. Uh, uh, can be seen in the numbers. This is the updated numbers for James Gunn's Superman movie. So at present, James Gunn's Superman movie has earned 314 million. That was as of Tuesday. Internationally, it's actually done well. It has $159 million, and domestically, it's 155. So it's caught up internationally, and it's actually surpassed the domestic box office right now. We'll see how that goes, but this is what it currently stands at, 314 million. That was on Tuesday. I'll be interested to see what the numbers look like into Thursday, which is today, or also because it should have some numbers by Wednesday. Also, what the numbers look like on in the second weekend. So that's really where we're gonna see what it actually makes, because then the truth will come out. In Box Office Mojo, I think they're still behind the numbers, but So you got Superman there. Yeah, it's still behind. So they haven't adjusted. They have adjusted the domestic, but they haven't adjusted the international yet. So I'm very curious to see how this all pans out in the end. But yeah, it's not just about. Okay, here's a perfect example. DC Studios continues relentless content dump, exhausting fans by releasing new crap daily like it's a subscription to disappointment. So this is the new Supergirl poster. Look out, and this reminds us very much of the first Shazam poster. And quite frankly, I mean, if this is what we have to look forward to, I think DC's in deep trouble. You know, and that's just my opinion, because I know Superman's going to flop. New details of the 363 million budget of Superman were revealed. James Gunn was paid 20 times David Cornsett's salary, gaining $15 million. The flying Superman statue in Shard in London cost the studio approximately $10 million. Which is better? Both scored points in critic and fandom circles for fixing DC, becoming comic accurate. Wonder Woman 2017 and Superman 2025. And you can see we have 563 votes so far, and Wonder Woman's kicking Superman's ass. Stoner Supergirl follow-up to Wimp Superman reportedly proves one must be a loser on drugs to comprehend DC's grand plans. The thing about it is, like everybody's been saying, you know, let's say Superman somehow gets by, that it makes, let's say it makes between 500 and 600 million dollars, right? The problem with that is the next two DCU movies, Supergirl and Clayface, they're not Superman. And that's sad. So, do we expect them to do better than Superman? They're not as popular. Now we'll say we could argue that James Gunn he knows how to use obscure characters and get money out of them. At least that's the gossip that goes around about him. We'll see how successful he is with this movie. But the point I'm making is this is the follow-up, and then Clayface. And I can't see either making more money than Superman. I just don't see it.
We are now slave to the world engine. Initiate.
So you see the absolute horror. People being carried up in the sky and slammed to the earth and destroyed. And the whole point behind it is to show how deadly and how dangerous this thing is. And how terrifying it is as well. But according to ultra-biased Snyder fans, stakes are no longer a thing in CBM filmmaking where world-ending events are happening and the thesis is good versus evil. Evil ain't eviling. Yeah, they make it too clean. They make the hero clean up the evil guy's mess really fast. And we don't get a follow-up on how many lives are lost and stuff. It's not realistic, you understand? So, yeah. Superman cost $225 million to make and another $125 million to market globally. And Carlos says they keep playing with the numbers, but we all know they went way above average for marketing. and way above average for the budget as well. Here is Zeus. This is Sergi Constance. He says, Sunset at Santa Monica Broadwalk, LA. Thank you for always capturing unforgettable memories. Reyes Flores says, they really don't like it. They want to like it. They'll give it a pass, but deep down, they want Henry Cavill. Deep down, they want Zack Snyder storytelling. Deep down, they know Superman by James Gunn wasn't it. Phil Me McGuire says, finished my Snyderverse rewatch. My review of Zack Snyder's Justice League on Letterboxd. All right. China is pulling Superman from all its theaters this weekend, and the box office run will end after 10 days. The film is given 100,000 screens and average 1 ticket per screening. So there you go. Superman is the #1 movie in the world. The world, America. Alaska and America. It's funny as hell. And Hawaii. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I got for you guys. You guys have a good one. I spent an hour and 32 minutes, and you guys stayed with me almost to the end. That's great. Have a good one, guys. You guys have a great remainder of your week. Peace.